The sun had barely risen over Maple Crossing, Virginia, when 17-year-old Ethan Marsh hopped into his father's gloss-black Escalade as if he owned the road it drove on. The early autumn air had that crisp bite that made people zip up their hoodies or roll down their sleeves. Everyone except Ethan, whose designer t-shirt cost more than the week's groceries for half the town. He slouched into the leather seat, scrolling through his phone with the dull impatience of a boy who had never once heard the word no spoken with consequence. Today he was due in juvenile court, again. Not for anything shocking, but for stupidity, speeding through a school zone with his music blasting, nearly sideswiping a crossing guard. In Maple Crossing, that was enough to get tongues wagging for days. Folks in town cared about that sort of thing. Safety, community, accountability. But Ethan wasn't worried. His dad was rich. And around here, rich often meant untouchable. Or so he thought. Ethan had grown up in a different Maple Crossing than most kids. His father, Charles Marsh, owned half the commercial real estate downtown. His mother passed away when Ethan was 12, breast cancer, and something in the boy hardened when she left. Charles responded by filling the void with allowance money, gadgets, vacations, and the quiet promise that anything could be fixed with the right lawyer. Charles loved his son. Deeply, even if imperfectly. But love expressed through indulgence is a fragile and dangerous thing. It teaches a child that affection is earned through smoothing problems over, not solving them. And so Ethan learned to live softly inside the world while expecting the world to bend around him. This morning, though, Charles was tense. "Ethan," he said, keeping his eyes on the road, "I need you to be respectful in there. Judge Richardson doesn't care how much money we have." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Dad, please. It's traffic stuff. I'll do community service, pay fines, whatever. Worst case, you talk to someone, right?" Charles exhaled through his nose. He hated when Ethan said that. "I'm not cleaning up your attitude today. You look the judge in the eye and answer politely." "Understood." "Sure," Ethan muttered, already tuning him out. The juvenile courthouse in Maple Crossing wasn't grand. It was squat, brick, functional, its hallways smelling faintly of cleaning products and old paper. Parents sat with nervous kids. A few attorneys whispered to anxious teens. The air thrummed with a mix of fear, regret, and adolescent bravado that only a juvenile court can hold. Ethan strutted in like he was walking into a mall, jaw chewing gum loudly, phone in hand. Charles wanted to shrink. "Put the phone away," he hissed. Ethan slid it into his pocket with exaggerated annoyance. They approached the courtroom where a plaque beside the door read, in clean serif print, "Judge Malcolm A. Richardson." Ethan snorted. "Oh great," he muttered. "Dad said he was strict." Charles stopped walking and gripped Ethan's shoulder. "He's fair," Charles said. "That's all that matters." But Ethan wasn't listening. He noticed the people of all backgrounds milling around the courthouse, black, white, Latino, old, young. He had grown up in the wealthy pockets of town, where his bubble made diverse crowds seem unusual. Inside the courtroom, Judge Malcolm Richardson presided with calm precision. He was black, in his early 50s, sporting neatly trimmed salt and pepper hair and a judicial robe that looked both official and strangely ordinary. He carried himself with the quiet strength of a man who had worked twice as hard for everything he had. Ethan didn't notice any of that. He only noticed the robe and the fact that the judge didn't look impressed by him. The courtroom clerk called cases in order, each one moving swiftly, respectfully. When Ethan's name was called, he rose lazily, strolling to the front like it was an inconvenience rather than a legal proceeding. Charles followed, attempting a polite nod to the judge. Judge Richardson glanced at Ethan's file, then at Ethan himself. "Good morning, Mr. Marsh." Ethan mumbled something that barely qualified as a greeting. The judge continued, "You're here regarding a speeding incident in a school zone. According to the report, you were traveling 49 miles per hour in a 25. You nearly struck a crossing guard." Ethan shrugged. "Wasn't that serious?" The room went quiet. Judge Richardson slowly removed his reading glasses. "Young man, do you understand the gravity of what nearly happened?" "I said it wasn't serious," Ethan replied. "Nobody got hurt." Charles felt a surge of panic. "Your Honor, I apologize." Judge Richardson raised a hand. "Mr. Marsh, I'll hear from you in a moment. Right now, I'm assessing your son's understanding of the incident." Ethan bristled. The idea of being spoken to strictly, especially by someone who didn't know who his father was, sent annoyance crawling up his spine. "It's just community service or whatever, right?" he said with a smirk. "My dad can take care of it." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Charles closed his eyes. Judge Richardson leaned forward. "Mr. Marsh, the law doesn't operate on who can take care of things. It operates on accountability and safety." "Oh, come on," Ethan laughed loudly. "My dad could buy." Charles's hand shot out to grab Ethan's arm. "Ethan, stop." But Ethan, adrenaline kicking in, stupidity blossoming fully, finished the sentence. "Could buy you if he wanted." The room turned to ice. Charles's heart dropped. "Ethan," he barked, turning red. "You apologize right now." Judge Richardson did not react with anger. He sat back, expression unreadable, letting the silence expand until Ethan shifted awkwardly, realizing, at last, he might have said the exact wrong thing. When the judge spoke, it was calm, collected, but firm with a force that could shatter stone. "Mr. Marsh," he said, "your statement was inappropriate, disrespectful, and carries undertones I will not tolerate in my courtroom." Ethan swallowed. "You will remain here," Richardson continued, "while I determine the appropriate response." Ethan slouched, muttering, "Whatever." Judge Richardson turned to the bailiff. "Deputy Harris, please escort Mr. Marsh to a holding room until I recall him." "What?" Ethan snapped. "You can't do that." "Yes," Judge Richardson said evenly, "I can." Harris, a middle-aged officer with a no-nonsense demeanor, approached. "Stand up, son. I'm not going anywhere." Ethan protested. But Harris didn't need to raise his voice. "I suggest you reconsider." Ethan hesitated. Then the reality, the very first shard of real consequence, shook his bravado. He stood, jaw trembling. As the bailiff led Ethan away, Charles stared at the floor in shame. The courtroom door closed behind Ethan. Judge Richardson looked at Charles with a softer expression now, though still professional. "Mr. Marsh, may I ask something?" the judge said quietly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Has your son always spoken like that to adults?" Charles took a seat, feeling older than his 48 years. "I've tried, Your Honor. He lost his mother young. I didn't handle it well. I gave him too much freedom, too much comfort, thinking it would help." "Grief affects every child differently," the judge said with understanding. "I know he's not a bad kid," Charles continued. "He's just lost. And he thinks money solves everything because that's how I've treated his problems." Judge Richardson nodded slowly. "That explains some things. Not excuses them." After 20 minutes, long enough for panic to replace arrogance, Ethan returned to the courtroom. His face was pale, his cockiness cracked. Judge Richardson addressed him evenly. "Mr. Marsh, I debated how best to handle your situation. You're at a critical age, and the path you choose now will define your character." Ethan looked at the floor. "You will be assigned 60 hours of community service," the judge said. "Specifically at the Maple Crossing Youth Center. You will work directly with younger children who depend on motorists like you to keep them safe." Ethan nodded weakly. "In addition," the judge continued, "because of your conduct in this courtroom, including a remark that was both disrespectful and racially charged, you will complete a cultural sensitivity and respect-based education program. And you will write a formal apology to the crossing guard you endangered." The courtroom was silent. "And one more thing," Judge Richardson added gently but firmly. "You will apologize to this court. Right now." Ethan looked up at him, voice cracking with the last remnants of teenage pride meeting reality. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I shouldn't have said what I said. It was stupid." Judge Richardson held his gaze. "I accept your apology. What matters is what you do next." Later that afternoon, Charles and Ethan drove home without speaking. It wasn't anger anymore, it was reflection, thick and heavy between them. Finally Charles said, "Son, do you understand why what you said hurt people?" Ethan stared out the window. "I didn't mean it like that." "That doesn't matter," Charles said gently. You meant it to belittle him. You meant it to show power over him. That's what matters. That's what you need to face." Ethan's throat tightened. He wasn't ready to admit it, but part of him had known it was wrong the moment the words left his mouth. He whispered, "Dad, are you mad at me?" Charles sighed. "I'm disappointed. But I'm proud you apologized. And I'm even more proud that the judge held you accountable. One day you'll thank him for it." Ethan reported the following Saturday to the Maple Crossing Youth Center. The director, Ms. Tanya Caldwell, a warm and no-nonsense woman in her 40s, greeted him. "Judge Richardson gave me a heads-up," she said. "You'll be helping with tutoring, afternoon games, and cleanup." Ethan nodded. Over the next weeks, something unexpected happened. Kids watched him with admiration. They asked him for help with homework, wanted him on their team for basketball, laughed at his jokes. Not because he was rich. Not because he was powerful. Not because of anything except that he was present and trying. Slowly, Ethan softened. He hadn't realized how good it felt to be looked up to, not because of money, but because of who he could be. On his last day, the youth center staff gathered to thank him. Ms. Caldwell pulled him aside. "You've done good work here," she said. "You've grown. Keep going." Ethan swallowed emotion he didn't want to show. "Thank you for not giving up on me." 60 days after the original incident, Ethan returned to Judge Richardson's courtroom, not as a defendant, but to complete his program. Judge Richardson reviewed the reports in front of him. "It appears you completed your service with responsibility and respect," the judge said. "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan replied. This time, his eyes were steady. Honest. The judge nodded. "One last question. What did you learn?" Ethan took a breath. "That I'm responsible for the impact of my behavior. That respect matters. And that I want to be better than I was that day." Judge Richardson smiled faintly. Then the consequences served their purpose. Charles placed a hand on his son's shoulder, pride without indulgence, love without enabling. As they walked out of the courtroom, Ethan glanced back at Judge Richardson, who was already turning to the next case. "Dad," Ethan said softly. "Yes. I want to write him a letter. Not the required one. Just something real." Charles smiled. "I think that's a good idea." A week later, Judge Richardson received an envelope postmarked from Maple Crossing. Inside was a handwritten note. "Your Honor, I know my apology in court was required, but this one isn't. I want to thank you for holding me accountable when no one else had. You didn't treat me like some spoiled kid, you treated me like someone who could grow. The youth center showed me what kind of person I want to be. I hope one day I make my mom proud again. Ethan Marsh." Judge Richardson folded the letter thoughtfully, a faint smile touching his lips. He placed it in his desk drawer where he kept notes from young people he had once worried about and who had found their way. The following weekend, Ethan and Charles volunteered at a community barbecue fundraiser for the youth center, together. Not because the court required it, but because the Marsh men had rediscovered something more important than privilege. Character, accountability, connection. And as Ethan helped set up tables, greeting people with kindness instead of arrogance, he realized something profound. His father hadn't been wrong. One day, he would thank Judge Richardson. And today was that day.